everybody. We're back. This week is called Mistakes Outside the Palace.
What?
Turn the page. Now, I bet you're thinking that King Saul made a mistake, aren't you? No, that's right. He usually is the one that makes mistakes, but it's not him. Maybe not everyone would agree with me, but I think that David made a mistake this week. So I'm going to tell you the story, and when we get to the end, you can let me know if you think that David made a mistake or not. Last time, David had to escape through a window and run away from King Saul. He went to the prophet Samuel. King Saul sent 3 messengers to capture David, and they all started to prophesy instead of getting David. And that made King Saul just a wee bit mad. Lastly, King Saul went himself, and God humbled him. King Saul had to lay at the feet of Samuel all day and all night prophesying. Quick question. Who remembers what prophecy means? Does anybody remember?
Me.
Yes, TT? Yes. Good job. That's right. Prophecy means to tell what will happen in the future. Now, I wonder if King Saul spent all day and all night prophesying that David was going to be king one day. Because that's something that was going to happen in the future, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, now that would have been awfully embarrassing, don't you think? If he had spent all day prophesying that David was going to be king, I think it would have made him even more mad. So, there was God keeping David safe with Samuel. And do you know what David did? Want to guess?
He prayed.
Prayed? Well, that would have been a good idea. Instead, David left. He left Samuel and went back to the palace and his friend Jonathan. So we're turning the page again. Now, Jonathan was the one who helped talk his dad out of killing David a while ago. Perhaps David thought Jonathan could do it again. I don't know. We're going to turn the page again. Don't be ridiculous, David, Jonathan said. My dad isn't trying to kill you. He tells me everything, and I'd have heard about it if he was. David said, your dad knows how much you like me. That's why he hasn't told you. I am but a step away from death. And Jonathan said, what do you want? I'll do it, because he was a really good friend. And David said, tomorrow's the new moon. I should be eating at the feast with the king, because I always do that. But let me go hide in the field for 3 days. If your father misses me, tell him that I asked to go visit my dad. Now, was David going to go visit his dad? No, he wasn't. That was a mistake. He was going to hide in the field for 3 days. So what was it that David just asked Jonathan to do?
Lie.
To lie. That is right. David asked Jonathan to lie. Now, what does the Bible say about lying? That's exactly right. The two of you repeated each other almost word for word. The Bible says, thou shalt not bear false witness. Now, false witness is like an old-fashioned way of saying don't lie. So you could also read that verse saying, thou shalt not lie. Now, we're going to turn the page. Now, we remember our song. It teaches us that when we learn Bible verses, it helps us know the right thing to do. And if David had remembered that Bible verse in Exodus about not lying, he wouldn't have asked his friend to lie. So what's our song, Jamie? You remember our song? Thy word have I hid in mine heart, that I might not sin against thee, that I might not sin, that I might not sin. Thy word have I hid in mine heart. Good job. You want to sing it again, James? Thy word have I hid in mine heart, that I might not sin against thee, that I might not sin, that I might not sin. Thy word have I hid in mine heart. All right. Yeah, did you sing it? Yeah.
I thought Swan is in it.
Did you? Well, that was lovely. In our last lesson, we learned how Michelle's lie didn't work out very well for her. Now, I wonder what's going to happen to David today. All right, let's turn the page and see. David, Jonathan said, I'm sure my dad doesn't plan to do anything to you, but I will let you know if he does. But David's like, well, who's going to tell me if he does? What if your dad speaks roughly to you? Turning the page, like throw a javelin at you. He's been known to do that a time or two, hasn't he? Mm-hmm. Yeah, all four, yeah. So Jonathan devised a special plan. He said, I'll shoot 3 arrows and send the boy to fetch them. If I tell the lad that the arrows are beside him, you know it's safe to come out. But if I tell the lad that the arrows are beyond him, you will know that he's not safe and that you ought to leave. So Jonathan made David a promise. Well, Jonathan actually asked David to make a promise. He said, when you become king, because I know you will be king, when you become king, please be kind to my family. Because normally when people became king, they killed all the former kings' brothers and sisters and kids and all that stuff. And Jonathan was like, please be kind to my family when you're king. And Jonathan loved David. He asked him twice, please promise me twice that you'll be kind. And Jonathan also promised that his sons and daughters would be kind to David's family. Both of them promised that their families would always be kind to each other. I'm going to turn the page again. So David stayed out in the field. And when it was time for the feast, King Saul did notice that David was not in his seat. He noticed. He said, where's David? And weirdly, King Saul didn't actually say anything. He didn't do anything. He just left it be. But he did wonder what had happened to David because David always came. He thought there must have been something that happened that prevented him from coming. I don't know what it was, though. But he didn't say anything that day. So there was David out in the field all night long because King Saul didn't say anything. I wonder what David was thinking. Is my friend okay? Was I wrong to what I asked Jonathan to do? What's happening in there? Can you imagine being out in a field all night long wondering if your friend was okay in the palace? No. That'd be a bit scary. It was not until the second day that King Saul asked Jonathan, why didn't Jesse's son come to eat yesterday or today? And Jonathan said, David begged me to let him go to Bethlehem to a special feast with his family. Anybody want to guess how King Saul reacted?
Okay.
You think he said okay?
Yeah.
What do you guys over there think? Angry, huh? Well, let's turn the page. What is this? What's this picture of?
Explosion.
An explosion. Good job. It is. David's ticking time bomb went kaboom. That's what lies are. They're like ticking time bombs. One day they go kaboom. And David's went kaboom. King Saul flipped his lid. He called Jonathan all kinds of several nasty names before he said, don't you know that as long as David is alive, you're never going to be king? Now send for David, for he shall surely die.
He's very angry.
He is angry, just like King Saul was really angry. That's right. He's going to have to do that. But we're not finished yet. Jonathan answered, but why? What has David done? And just like David feared, King Saul did throw a javelin at Jonathan. He did, but he missed him. He threw a javelin at Jonathan, but he missed him. He didn't actually hit him. So the next page we have, the Bible says that Jonathan rose from the table in a fierce anger. He didn't eat that day because he was sad for David's sake and because he was ashamed of his father, because he knew his father was doing wrong. That made him so upset that he didn't eat. But there was David still out in the field wondering what was going on. Well, the next day, so in 3 days' time, like David had said, Jonathan took 3 arrows and a lad to the field where David had hid, just like he promised. And as the lad ran, Jonathan shot an arrow beyond him. And when the lad reached the place where the arrow was, Jonathan yelled, "Is not the arrow beyond you? Make speed, haste, stay not." Now, you already answered that question, Blake. What do you think that means? That David ought to run. That's right. You told me that before. Good job.
And this guy's going to...
Is he going to run too?
No, he's going to...
Okay, that's not part of our story. Thank you. Jonathan was telling his friend... No, that's not what it was. Jonathan was telling his friend David to run as fast as he could because it wasn't safe. So the lad took Jonathan's 3 arrows. Yes, okay, he is running, but let's just put him down there for a minute. The lad took Jonathan's 3 arrows back inside the palace, and he had no idea that David was there. Not any idea that David was there. He didn't know. Now the next page. When the lad was gone, David came out and bowed 3 times to Prince Jonathan. And when the 2 best friends hugged and cried, and David cried most of all. "Go in peace," Jonathan said. "We have sworn that the Lord will go between me and thee, and between my children and your children forever." So David left, and Jonathan went back into the city. Now, here's our question. Do you agree with me? Do you think that David made a mistake this week? Yeah, you think he did? Yeah. Asking your friend to lie. But you know, when I was a little kid, I didn't actually think that David made a mistake, because it is okay to talk to your friends about problems. But I'd forgotten that David had asked Jonathan to lie. I didn't notice that when I was a little kid. Sometimes it's hard to notice things. When I got older, I thought, David shouldn't have asked his friend to lie. That was wrong. Now, what do you think David should have done? Sorry, what was that? You think he should have gone to the feast?
Yeah.
That's one thing. I think David should have actually stayed with Samuel.
Or at least go to his actual father.
He could have gone to his father instead of asking his friend to lie. He could have stayed with Samuel because God was keeping him safe. He could have gone to the feast and trusted that God would keep him safe. Because King Saul had thrown a couple of javelins at David by this point, hadn't he? And God had 4 times. That's right. 4 times already. I think it was 4. I think you're right. And God had kept him safe all those times. So there was a lot of things that David could have done. But one thing we know for sure that he should have done is, someone had said that before, he should have prayed. Remember right at the start when I said that God was keeping David safe, and he should have prayed. That was one of the best things that you ought to do when you're not sure about what to do. Pray. And that brings us to our Bible verse, because it reminds us that we're supposed to trust God. No matter if you stay with Samuel, or if he should have went back to the feast, or if he should have talked to Jonathan but then gone to a feast with his dad instead of lying about it. We should pray and talk to God and trust in him, because God keeps us safe, doesn't he? God knows how to keep us safe. I'm sorry. No, we need to listen. We've got to do our Bible verse. You going to say it with me? What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. Psalm 53, verse 3. What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. Psalm 53, verse